October 15th, 2015. The sun rises over Silicon Valley, but a shadow is about to fall across its most celebrated new star. In the newsroom of the Wall Street Journal, a story goes live. Montage of newspaper headlines with a blurred Elizabeth Holmes. Headline hits a $9 billion empire. The story alleges Theranos' revolutionary technology is a sham. It claims Elizabeth Holmes' company is not using its own devices for the vast majority of tests. In an instant, the startup is on the defensive. Its carefully constructed reality begins to fracture under the weight of a single, devastating report. The fallout is immediate and catastrophic. Phones ring incessantly in Theranos' Palo Alto headquarters. Walgreens, Safeway. Partners who had gambled millions now demand answers. Federal regulators, once cautiously optimistic, now sharpen their focus and shift from regulation to investigation. The story spreads like wildfire through the media. Outlets that lionized Holmes now plaster her face alongside the words, fraud, deception, lies. The narrative she controlled for a decade has been stolen from her. The dream is turning into a nightmare, live on the global stage. How could it all go so wrong, so fast? Inside Theranos, a culture of fear and secrecy suddenly turns to pure panic. Years of being told to ignore the glitches, to overlook the failed tests, and to trust the vision now collide with the harsh light of public scrutiny. Whistleblowers watch as their warnings are finally validated. Outside the sterile, glass-walled labs, whispers of federal interest begin to circulate. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the Department of Justice, the FBI. The institutions that police the line between vision and crime are now circling. The company that promised to save lives by making healthcare accessible to all is now fighting for its own life. The questions are relentless. Did the technology ever work? What did the highly decorated board of directors know? And what about the patients, thousands who had their blood tested by a machine that might have given false, even dangerous results? Answers would take years, buried under legal threats and NDAs. But to understand the collapse, we must first go back to the beginning. We must go back to the dream that started it all. Before the scandal, before the trials, there was a vision. It was a vision so powerful, so elegant in its simplicity, that it seduced the world. Imagine a small, sleek box, a device that could run hundreds of medical tests. Cholesterol levels, early cancer markers, all from a single, tiny drop of blood drawn from your fingertip. No more big needles. No more waiting days for lab results. Just fast, cheap, and painless diagnostics available in every pharmacy, every home. This was the promise of Theranos. It was a promise that would make its founder, Elizabeth Holmes, a billionaire and a global icon. The company was valued at over $9 billion. It wasn't a public company, traded on the stock market. This valuation was bestowed upon it by some of the smartest, most powerful investors in the world. Seasoned venture capitalists, political titans, business legends. They saw Holmes, with her black turtleneck and deep, commanding voice, and they saw the future. They saw the disruption of a multi-trillion-dollar healthcare industry. They saw a chance to do good for the world while making an astronomical return on their investment. So, how did a company built on a technology that never truly worked convince so many powerful people that it was the next Apple or Google? How did a 19-year-old college dropout from Stanford build a corporate board Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, James Mattis? They weren't just names on a letterhead, they were true believers, convinced they were backing a revolution. They put their reputations on the line for Elizabeth Holmes and her incredible, world-changing machine. What did she show them that made them believe so completely? This is a story about the intoxicating power of a good narrative. It's a story about ambition, secrecy, and the blurred line between fake it till you make it and outright fraud. To understand how one of Silicon Valley's brightest stars became one of its most infamous convicts, we must peel back the layers of hype and secrecy. We must examine the dream that mesmerized politicians, investors, and journalists alike. Because the story of Theranos isn't just about a failed company, it's about the very nature of belief and deception in the modern age. Let's go back to 2003, where it all began with a young woman and a very big idea. The year is 2003. On the sun-drenched campus of Stanford University, a hub for the brightest minds destined to shape the future, a 19-year-old chemical engineering student makes a monumental decision. Her name is Elizabeth Holmes. While her peers were focused on midterms and fraternity parties, Holmes was consumed by a singular, audacious idea. She saw a world where healthcare was reactive, expensive, and intimidating. She envisioned a future where it was proactive, affordable, and accessible to everyone. Convinced that her time was better spent building this future than studying it, she made a choice that would become a core part of her legend. She dropped out of one of the world's most prestigious universities. This wasn't a story of academic failure, it was a story of radical conviction. Holmes used her tuition money, saved by her parents for her education, as the seed capital for her new venture. She named it Theranos, a portmanteau of therapy and diagnosis. Her parents, a former government official and a congressional staffer, were her first true believers, offering not just financial support, but a crucial vote of confidence in their daughter's immense ambition. It was a gamble on a dream. The Stanford dropout narrative was perfect. It echoed the origin stories of other Silicon Valley titans like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. From the very beginning, Holmes understood the power of image. She began to cultivate a distinct persona. The uniform was the now infamous black turtleneck, a direct homage to her idol, Steve Jobs. It was a simple but brilliant piece of branding. She adopted a deep baritone voice, a deliberate affectation that commanded attention and projected an authority far beyond her years. She rarely blinked, her large, unblinking eyes fixing on whomever she spoke to, creating an aura of unwavering focus and hypnotic intensity. The $9 billion company. By 2014, the story Elizabeth Holmes had been telling for over a decade reached its crescendo. Theranos was no longer a fledgling startup. It was a Silicon Valley titan. A new funding round, pulling in a staggering $400 million, pushed the company's private valuation to a jaw-dropping $9 billion. Holmes, who owned more than half of the company, was now, on paper, the world's youngest self-made female billionaire. This valuation was achieved with astonishing speed and secrecy. Theranos operated like a black box. The $9 billion figure was built not on audited revenues or proven technology, but on the power of its narrative and the promise of future disruption. Investors clamored for a piece of the action. They poured in hundreds of millions without audited financial statements. They were forbidden from conducting independent due diligence on the technology itself. Why would anyone accept such terms? Because the fear of missing out on the next Google was far greater than the fear of the unknown. The Board of Believers, a $9 billion valuation, demands an air of unimpeachable credibility. To silence doubters and project absolute authority, she assembled a politically connected board. It was a strategic masterstroke, elder statesmen acting as a human shield. The names were breathtaking: Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, William Perry, and then came the military brass, James Mad Dog Mattis. For these men, Holmes was a captivating figure. George Shultz was particularly enchanted, even putting his own grandson Tyler to work at the company. These men, experts in geopolitics and military strategy, had little to no experience in clinical diagnostics. They were sold on the vision, not the science. The board became the ultimate validation, a substitute for the technological proof that was so conspicuously absent. The only thing missing was a public coronation. The media was happy to provide it. Magazine covers were her new stage. Fortune, Forbes, Bloomberg Businessweek, the New York Times style magazine. The comparison was constant and deliberate. She was the next Steve Jobs. These profiles were not critical investigations. They were hymns of praise. They marveled at her work ethic and lived on a diet of green juice. She was named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people. She appeared on panels with Bill Clinton and Jack Ma. This media frenzy created a powerful feedback loop. The glowing profiles rarely, if ever, asked the hard questions. But behind the fortress of NDAs and the wall of positive press, a few people knew the truth. And one of them was about to reach out to a journalist who wasn't afraid to ask the questions everyone else had ignored. The rise was over. The cracks were about to show. The year is 2015. In the bustling newsroom of the Wall Street Journal, an investigative reporter named John Carreyrou receives a curious tip. He is skeptical about the claims being made by Silicon Valley's darling Theranos. He finds it scientifically implausible. The claims, he suggests, defy the basic principles of chemistry and medicine. But for a seasoned journalist like Carreyrou, it's enough. It's a loose thread on a perfectly woven tapestry. He decides to pull on it. His initial inquiries are met with a wall of silence. Former employees, bound by ironclad non-disclosure agreements, are terrified to speak. He is searching for a crack in the fortress. Slowly, painstakingly, he finds one. A former employee agrees to speak off the record. One is Erica Chung, a new lab associate who was shocked by the company's cavalier approach to quality control. She saw the company manipulating data to make its technology appear effective. The second crucial voice is Tyler Schultz. He is the grandson of George Schultz. He discovered that Theranos was secretly running its tests on commercially available machines from Siemens. He then took the extraordinary step of trying to warn his own grandfather. But the elder Schultz, completely captivated by Holmes, sided with her and dismissed his grandson's warnings. Chung and Schultz provide Carreyrou with the ammunition he needs. They describe a process called data cherry-picking. The decision to speak out comes at an immense personal cost. Both Chung and Schultz are hounded by Theranos' notoriously aggressive lawyers. They are followed, threatened with lawsuits, but they refuse to back down. Their courage gives the story its undeniable power, the Edison deception. With the whistleblower's testimony, the central lie of Theranos is laid bare. The Edison machine was a failure. It was the centerpiece of every pitch. But inside the company, engineers and scientists had known for years that it was a fantasy. When it came time to run patient samples, lab workers would perform a secret sleight of hand. The blood was diluted and transferred to traditional vials. These vials were then loaded into large conventional blood analyzers purchased from Siemens, the very industry incumbents Theranos claimed to be disrupting. Carreyrou's investigation uncovers horror stories from real patients. The company that promised to save lives was actively endangering them. Internal documents leaked to Carreyrou confirm that the company was aware of the problems. But these warnings were systematically ignored by Holmes and her second-in-command, Sunny Balwani. The gathering storm. Throughout the summer of 2015, Theranos gets word that a major expose is coming to launch an all-out war against the Wall Street Journal. Elizabeth Holmes deploys her most powerful weapon, David Boies. Boies and his legal team unleash a campaign of legal threats and intimidation. She appeals directly to the newspaper's owner, Rupert Murdoch, who also happens to be a major investor. Holmes pleads with him, arguing that Carreyrou is a rogue reporter. The pressure is immense. The newspaper's editor-in-chief, Gerard Baker, has to make a choice. On October 15, 2015, the Wall Street Journal's editors make their decision. They hit publish. The article drops. It is an understated title for a story that detonates like a bomb in the heart of Silicon Valley. Elizabeth Holmes, ever the performer, immediately goes on the offensive. She looks directly into the camera and denies everything.
"This is what happens when you work to change things," she declares. "First they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world."
Her most crucial partner, Walgreens, will halt the rollout of any new Theranos wellness centers. The message is clear and brutal. We no longer trust you. The media, once her greatest ally, turns on her with a vengeance. She is no longer a visionary. She is a suspect. The Wall Street Journal article was the spark, but the federal government provided the inferno. The Food and Drug Administration moves first. They find that Theranos was using an uncleared medical device. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services launches its own surprise inspection. The inspection uncovers widespread failures that pose immediate jeopardy to patient health and safety. Financial and business partnerships disintegrate. Safeway formally walks away. The powerful board of directors begins to fracture. The final, most feared phase of the collapse begins. The Securities and Exchange Commission opens a formal investigation. The Department of Justice launches a criminal investigation. By 2018, the slow, agonizing collapse reaches its inevitable conclusion. The company that was once worth $9 billion is now effectively worthless. In March 2018, the SEC charges Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, and Sunny Balwani. Holmes agrees to a settlement. Balwani refuses to settle. 3 months later, the criminal charges land. A federal grand jury indicts both Holmes and Balwani. The potential penalty is no longer a fine, but up to 20 years in federal prison. In September 2018, the company announces it is formally dissolving. The dream is officially over. The final act of the Theranos saga played out under the solemn, unblinking gaze of the American justice system. Elizabeth Holmes's criminal trial began in the fall of 2021. For months, the world watched as prosecutors methodically deconstructed the myth she had built. They presented damning evidence. Holmes took the stand, attempting one last, desperate performance. She cried. She expressed regret, but she never fully admitted the lie. In January 2022, the jury delivered its verdict. Guilty on 4 counts of defrauding investors. The sentence landed like a thunderclap in Silicon Valley. Holmes was sentenced to over 11 years. Balwani received nearly 13 years. She had graced magazine covers, and in May 2023, she reported to a federal prison camp in Bryan, Texas, trading her black turtleneck for a prison uniform. The verdict marked the end of an era, drawing a line between fake it till you make it and criminal fraud, and Holmes had crossed it. Theranos was meant to be a cautionary tale for Silicon Valley, a reckoning for a culture that rewards hype over substance and personality cults over proven results. The story exposed unchecked ambition, failures of due diligence by smart money, and a media that prefers a good story. It felt like it should have changed everything. But has the lesson been learned? The mechanics of Silicon Valley, pressure for rapid growth, celebration of charismatic founders, and FOMO-driven investment, remain in place. Founders still make audacious promises about world-changing tech, often with little more than a slick presentation and a compelling narrative. The story of Elizabeth Holmes is over, but the ecosystem that created her is still alive. Which leads to a final, unsettling question. Was Theranos a one-of-a-kind fraud, or is Silicon Valley still built on the same lies?